How often were you told with this coronavirus pandemic, follow the medical advice? Don't question it, follow it even when it seemed to make no sense and took away your freedoms. I mean, last year, for instance, as I said here many times, it seemed crazy that we were banned at times, particularly in Victoria, even from walking out in the open air without a mask, when this virus was in fact almost always spread indoors. It was even stranger that we had to wear face masks outside I mean, rather than just inside. I mean, I get it, I guess, inside, but outside. But if you complained, if you were reckless, well, not reckless, you were called reckless, and police could pounce on you, wrestle you to the ground and arrest you violently, particularly in Victoria, for not wearing that mask out in the fresh air. Well, you're actually probably causing no one any harm at all. But now there's an interesting development in the US. 2.5 months ago, the governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, said, well, enough of this. He ended the state's mask rule and eased a lot of other restrictions. The media said, oh, you're going to kill people. And the governor of California is very gung-ho on bans. He called Abbott's move absolutely reckless. And President Joe Biden, who campaigned wearing masks, accused Abbott of Neanderthal thinking.
I think it's a big mistake. Look, I hope everybody's realized by now, these masks make a difference. And the last thing we need is Neanderthal thinking.
But guess what? Texas has now just recorded 0 COVID deaths for the first time since this pandemic hit. It now has 80,000 active cases. Sounds a lot, but California, with only a third more people, has 20 times that many active cases. Joining me is Sky News US correspondent Anneliese Nielsen. Anneliese, this is quite interesting. Governor Abbott took a big risk lifting that mask law. Why do you think he did that?
Well, it seems like a big risk in a national context, but when you look at the culture around Texas, it wasn't a big risk at all. One of the reasons I've been really fascinated by this one in particular is because outside of DC since I moved here, and really they were never that focused on any of those coronavirus restrictions. When you look at a lot of those caseloads too, they were centered around those big cities, which are more Democrat enclaves anyway. So for the governor there, it was very much popular support that he had to not be enforcing any of these mask mandates too strictly. It came down really to a city-wide or local county enforcement of those mask mandates, and that really wasn't happening anyway. So what this has shown is that this is a really interesting case point in a national trend downward of coronavirus cases because the vaccine rollout's happening, but Texas alone, it's about 30% have been fully vaccinated there. That's well below the national average. What they have seen is very high cases in the very early days and also around January in this pandemic. They were having about 30,000 cases a day. But to get to 0 deaths, the important caveat there is that was a Sunday. There tends to be very low reporting of these issues until Monday when the kind of bureaucracy picks up again, and there were 23 deaths the day after. But what this does show is that things are easing up, and a lot of that's to do with the actual design of Texas. People mostly drive in their cars, so you are quite isolated as it is. The weather's warming up, and so some of those transmission issues aren't as much of a problem when you're outdoors and spending more time in the fresh air. But this has been quite a vindicating moment for Texas.
Which is the whole point about why it's crazy to wear these bloody masks in the outdoors anyway. But I mean, look, California's on the same, the same parallel as Texas, and it's got a far higher rate of infections and deaths than Texas, and despite being really mask. So I think it's really interesting. Bill Gates, the Microsoft founder, is supposedly the world's third richest man, but money is not saving him now from a very public humiliation as he goes through a messy divorce with wife Melinda. What are we now learning, Anneliese?
Well, we're learning that there's been two major issues thrown at Bill Gates this week. One has been that he's alleged to have had an affair with a co-worker at Microsoft, and that was part of his ousting from the board. Now, his representatives have all but confirmed that this was one of the issues that he faced in the last year. But now we're also seeing these leaks about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, this Mr. Epstein was pretty ubiquitous in American public life for a very long time, so these dots are being connected continuously, but the timing of this is all quite curious. There's reporting even that Melinda Gates has been working with lawyers for the last year in the lead up to announcing this divorce, and so this is showing that this is going to be one of those really salacious ones for Americans to follow.
Now, you say salacious. Now, you know, some of the things you just mentioned, the affairs, claims that Gates reached out to other women who were working in his company, and that the board then, you know, stepped in and he had to leave. All right, that's one thing. But it is also now alleged that Gates met billionaire Jeffrey Epstein several times, more than Gates once admitted, after this is important, after Epstein was convicted for pedophilia the first time, and Gates' wife was supposedly concerned about this. What does the man himself say?
Well, we haven't had too much detail from Bill Gates on this, and what we are expecting to see is when this whole family court process takes over, that there's going to be more of these details. But you have to think, if Melinda Gates is coming out with these kind of drops to certain media outlets at this point in time, this is only going to get worse. There's very high stakes here, of course. I mean, the entire family net worth is over, I think it was $180 billion. This is going to be a very hard fought after divorce, and what we are going to see is more leaks like this if this is what's coming out very early. But this is quite serious. This is a man who's been accused of having some of the worst connections. And I mean, you just have to look at what's happened to Prince Andrew to see just how toxic his brand is. So this is going to have very long-running ramifications. And this is all coming at the same time that Bill Gates has been facing down this pervasive conspiracy theory in the US that the COVID-19 vaccine has a microchip in it. That's been a huge challenge for public health officials here, trying to negate that one, because those things take off as they do.
Well, that's in that's in Fruit Loop territory. But the whole fact is that this pedophile, should I say that Epstein has since killed himself after being charged a second time, had some amazingly powerful connections. Bill Clinton was one of perhaps most notorious. But there you go. Very, very interesting. Anneliese Nielsen, thanks for your time.